If priests can be defrocked, doesn't it follow that electricians can be delighted, musicians denoted, cowboys deranged, models deposed, and elected popes delectable? In last Sunday's Gospel, Jesus elects Peter the first pope when he said, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." Then in today's Gospel, Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me." First Peter is pope, then Satan. What is Jesus thinking? Does he want Peter or not? The answer is yes, but on Jesus' terms. Today's Gospel gives the terms or guidelines Jesus wants us, his disciples, to follow in building and leading his church. Though Jesus was all loving when speaking about truth, he was a straight shooter and didn't mince words with anyone, including Peter. He was saying that to build his church there must be both death and resurrection. First he says it in words, and then he later lives it by dying and rising. The high priests and some of Jesus' own people rejected him. Yet, by being the cornerstone rejected by the builders, he lays the groundwork for Peter to become the first stone of the body of Christ. This dying and rising wasn't a new concept. It appears in today's Old Testament first reading from Jeremiah, which says, "The word of the Lord has brought me derision and reproach, yet it becomes like fire burning in my heart." In other words, death before rising. Paul reminds us of it in today's second reading. "Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, that you may discern what is good and pleasing and perfect." In other words, dying to self before union with God. Yet Peter didn't initially understand the teaching. Only later did he become aware and was crucified at his request upside down, so as not to be honored with a death like Jesus. But today's readings refer not just to Peter, but also to all of us. So let's take poetic license to reword today's readings to apply to our present-day struggles and see how we would react. Jesus showed us that he and we must live in Houston and suffer greatly, lose everything in the floods, and on the third deep day be rescued. Isn't that exactly what we are experiencing with Hurricane Harvey, the worst such disaster in U.S. history? Then we approached Jesus and began to rebuke him. "God forbid, no such thing shall ever happen to us." Isn't that what we said when we designed the reservoirs for a 500-year flood event? It can't happen to us, not us. We are too smart and too good at engineering for such a flood to ever happen to us. Indeed, we believed it. Then Hurricane Harvey said to us, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." And isn't that what the power of Hurricane Harvey did to us? It rebuked our delusions in the strongest of terms, just as Jesus rebuked Peter in the strongest of terms. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny themselves, accept their losses and material things, and follow me." Isn't that what many police, firefighters, and volunteers did when their own houses were lost, and that they went out and saved other people's lives and houses anyway? "For whoever wishes to save his house and even his life will lose it, but whoever loses his house and even life for my sake will find it." Isn't that what Police Sergeant Steve Perez literally did when he risked his life to save others and drowned in his own car? What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world of house and material things and forfeit his life? Wasn't Jesus saying he would rescue Sergeant Perez for the next life because Sergeant wasn't thinking of himself in order to gain worldly pleasures and prestige? He was showing love toward others. And isn't God also saying that he will rescue us in this life when we recognize that he, and not the materialism of even our own house, is the true source of life within us. For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all of you based on your conduct during this hurricane. I saw this firsthand while seeking shelter away from my house. A family entered with a young 11-year-old girl whose eyes showed worry and fear. Recognizing that look in her eyes and asking her if she were worried, she nodded in response. Telling her everything would be okay and not to worry, she was given an ice cream sandwich. In her eyes, an angel had arrived and lifted her spirits to a wonderful smile. The mother's face showed appreciation for recognizing her daughter's angst and reaching out to her. Offer your bodily help as living hope to the flood victims, a sacrifice holy and pleasing to God, that you may prioritize during the storm what is really good and pleasing and perfect. Isn't that what we all observed when people decided what was really important in their lives? They discovered that literal death, like Sergeant Perez, isn't necessarily all there is to Jesus' message. I personally witnessed this transformation in many, including myself, who at first were focused solely on saving their house, thinking it was their true life. Then, only after a state of helplessness, were they able to transcend that attitude and recognize we didn't need our house, but had found our true life in our families and ourselves, a true life with Christ dwelling within all of us. God doesn't do things to hurt us, but we will never know what he has in mind when he allows us to suffer, when he allows us to enter that realm of helplessness which holds huge potential for divine healing, provided we are open to him. As Monk Father Keating wrote, powerlessness is our greatest treasure. Perhaps the lesson the little girl experienced was one of love and compassion that may bear fruit from her to others for years to come. Coast to coast, our secular society is immersed in division and strife. Politics, social status, gender, religion, race, and ethnicity are falsely used to divide us. This hurricane was a call for unity. As the universal equalizer, it forced us to focus our priorities on our common humanity. It humiliated us to the point of giving us the gift of humility and thus compassion for others. Though this compassion is for all, since all were affected, we must especially extend compassion to you who feel hopelessness, you who have lost everything, have no flood insurance, have mortgage payments, have no food, have children without a home. We must especially become angels to you.